And so a general sort of commentary on these surahs that come in the last part of the Quran, these short surahs, right? Is that you will find that these surahs are dedicated to things that, I'll tell you what they're not. They're not about law. These chapters are not about do's and don'ts. They are not about, issues of, buying and selling. They're not about transactions. They are not about warfare, politics. It's not about any of those. These chapters, which were revealed in the Meccan period. The Meccan period was when the Prophet, peace be upon him, started advocating for his ideas. When he first got the revelation, when he started sharing his message. And so he was laying the foundations. And you can see that in these chapters. And that these chapters talk about issues of faith. And much of it is about things of the unseen. And so that understanding, that background is important, that a lot of the things that are discussed are a glimpse of the world unseen. And it's an unseen world. It's something that we have not seen. It is something that we have not experienced. And it is a different realm, a different dimension, if you will. Completely, just literally unseen, unheard of, unexperienced. These are things we kind of cannot relate to. So how do you describe those things, right? And so the Quran's method is to use the closest thing in this world. Even the closest thing is not nearly close at all, right? But the Quran just picks the closest thing that people can relate to, that can somehow convey the gist of the essence of what is to be shared. And so, for example, when God Almighty describes paradise, some of the descriptions of paradise is rivers, right? Some of the descriptions of paradise is rivers and gardens. And what are some other descriptions you can remember? Share some from the Quran that you know. Gardens, rivers, flowing water, palaces,
shady trees with kind of
trees.
right?
low hanging fruits.
Yeah, and different types of rivers. A river of water, of course, okay, that we can relate to, but river also of milk,
Milk.
of honey, right?
Milk also. Milk.
أنهار من عسل مصفى وأنهار من خمر, even wine. You know, the Quran talks about rivers of wine, right? And so it's important then to understand that these are the closest things that we can sort of have some sort of a description. All of these descriptions are qualified. They're qualified by what the Quran says, but the Prophet has said it in a very brief phrase, that he has said that these are things that you that no eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard about these things, and no heart has contemplated these. No one has ever, it hasn't crossed anyone's mind, in other words. And the Prophet is talking about the blessings of paradise. And so you qualify all of these things about the blessings of paradise based on that. And likewise, the Quran talks about some of the harsher realities of the next life. That there definitely will be accountability, that there will be, people will be held to account as a deterrent, the Quran, as a message from God, does talk about punishment. It does talk about the consequences that people face who are unjust and who do wrong and who oppress others and who take other people's rights and who usurp people's land and who commit all these different types of injustices and atrocities. The Quran does talk about consequences for them, right? And those consequences are discussed sometimes in very stark and very difficult to fathom for us. But that's the way we are as human beings. It is not meant to paint a picture of a God that's not merciful, because He is merciful. And every time you talk about God's punishment, His wrath, you have to understand it based on that reality that God has said that my mercy encompasses my wrath, right? That وَرَحْمَتِي, right? غَلَبَتْ غَضَبِ. But the Quran also talks about وَرَحْمَتِي وَسِعَتْ كُلَّ شَيْء. My mercy and compassion has encompassed everything, right? And so it reminds us to be hopeful, right? To be optimistic, but to be optimistic in a way that we also, in the back of our minds, have a deterrent also. Because sometimes the good news and the glad tidings and the encouragement, those things sometimes are not sufficient for certain people to do good. Sometimes we need a deterrent, right? Sometimes it's not enough to reward your children, they also need a warning, a deterrent, some tough love, right? So the Quran gives us tough love as well. But ultimately the message is not to be scared, the message is to be deterred from bad. And the message still encompasses the element of mercy. The element of mercy that, God's mercy is so vast, so limitless, so infinite, that if despite all of the open gates and the floodgates of God's mercy that's out there, you still don't earn it, when He's so forgiving, He's so easygoing with you, He so wants to make things easy for you, and He so wants you to be on His good side, and you still don't avail of that opportunity, then there's something wrong, right? So that deterrent is there. That there will be people that God will punish, there will be people that God will hold accountable, and it has to be, right? It has to be done in that way, because look at this world. When you look at the injustices of this world, no society can ever do enough to do justice to the oppressed, right? How do you do justice to the Palestinians, right? I don't think any human being can give them justice at this point. Within months, 40,000 people, and probably much more, right, have been wiped out. Can any human being ever give them justice? Can any system, can any UN resolution, can any ceasefire? No, it's just too late. It's too late for full justice to be done and to be provided, right? And that's just one example. Countless others in our world today, countless examples from the past, countless examples in our personal lives that, someone did you wrong and there's just no way to undo that. They can apologize all they want, but the kind of hurt that they have caused, the kind of loss that they have caused, the kind of trauma that they have imprinted upon your heart, that's just indelible, right? And so there has to be a mechanism for all of those wrongs to be righted. And we're hoping that the majority of the world, the majority of human beings, will not end up there, that we will end up not doing those atrocious things to earn us that kind of a place in God's wrath, right? That we will, inshallah, be forgiven for our shortcomings, that we make amends for our shortcomings, especially when it comes to your shortcomings against fellow human beings. Because when it comes to God's rights, there's a lot of leeway, there's a lot of room. You know, He can overlook. He's just so merciful that we can be very, very optimistic. Other people's rights, having wronged other people, having oppressed others, there's not much optimism there, except that you undo what you have done and do your best to undo the wrong. And so that context is important when it comes to reflecting on these surahs of the Quran. So let's open to Surah 102. It begins with that tough time that we experience towards the end of time. And then it transitions into what is the recipe for success? How do you, despite all the difficulty of that day, how do you manage to survive? How do you manage to be saved? How do you manage to be in God's good graces on that day? That is also given to us. And the consequences for those who have done wrong is also there. Ultimately, the message is to promote goodness, to promote that which pleases God and that which helps and supports and gives happiness and dignity to your fellow human beings, that which makes this world a better place. That's the entire message, is to encourage that. And Allah is doing this in a way that humans kind of react to and engage with. It's not always, of course, the Quran talks a lot about His rewards, His blessings, but also this deterrent is something that's there. That balance is important. And so Al-Qariah, that's the first ayah, right? Actually, we forgot to recite, so let's recite it together, and then we'll go over the meanings. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم القارعة ما القارعة وما أدراك ما القارعة يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث وتكون الجبال كالعهن المنفوش فأما من ثقلت موازينه فهو في عيشة راضية وأما من خفت موازينه فأمه هاوية وما أدراك ما هي نار حامية. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم القارعة ما القارعة وما أدراك ما القارعة So, looks like everyone knows this surah. Alright. Alright, so let's translate it.
I think it's 101, not 102. Yeah.
Oh, I said 102 and everyone's like, yeah, it's 102. So 101. I hope you've been looking at the right surah. Okay, who wants to go for it? Translation? Yes, or Urdu. If you want. You just do whatever I guess you like or whatever is there.
The striking disaster, what is the striking disaster? And what will make you realize what the striking disaster is? It is the day people will be like scattered moths, and the mountains will be carted gold. So as for those whose scale is heavy with good deeds, they will be in a life of bliss. And as for those whose scale is light, their home will be in bliss. And what will make you realize what that is? It is a scorching fire.
Awesome. Another one, or a different translation maybe?
I have Yusuf Ali.
Alright.
The day of noise and clamor. What is the day of noise and clamor? And what will explain to thee what the day of noise and clamor is? It is a day whereon men will be like moths, scattered about, and the mountains will be like carded wool. Then he whose balance of good deeds will be found heavy will be in a life of good pleasure and satisfaction. But he whose balance of good deeds will be found light will have his home in a bottomless pit. And what will explain to thee what this is? It is a fire blazing fiercely.
Alright. Pretty tough, right? But I warned you, give you the context, so that's the deterrent. So let's go over some analysis of the word. So Al-Qariah, which is the first ayah, it's a one-word ayah. Al-Qari'ah is the so when you knock very violently on a thing or a door or something, that's called qara', right? Or when you walk real, while you stomp on the ground, that's also called qara'. So qari'ah is basically a day that has that kind of sort of chaotic scenes, a lot of noise, a lot of chaos. What are some of the translations they use? The striking, right? Or what else have they used? If you look at the different translation, crashing blow, or crashing blows.
Qira'ah also is like the same root, right? It has to do with sound.
So qara' is qaf ra ayn, that's the root. Qira'ah is qaf ra alif or hamza. So maybe there is some correlation, but one letter is different. So crashing blow. What else? Calamity. Okay. So the literal meaning is that blow that creates a lot of noise. But as a metaphor, it's used to describe something that's extremely catastrophic, right? Big catastrophe that happens, that's qari'ah, right? Like come November, if this one guy wins, it's a catastrophe, right? But if the other guy wins, the lady wins, it's a catastrophe for the other half of the country, right? So a catastrophe is also, it depends on who's talking about the catastrophe, right? So a catastrophic sort of situation is Al-Qariah. And so Mal Qari'ah, the second ayah, asks the question, what is this Qari'ah? What is this catastrophe? What is this crashing blow? And so when that question is asked, first of all, it helps get our attention, right? That's the Quranic device to get our attention. In many instances, a question is asked like that, just to get our attention, and to remind the audience that the qari'ah that you have in mind, the little things that happen here, someone gets elected or defeated and you think that's a catastrophe, that's nothing. You have not seen anything like this, right? Al-Qariah, what is Al-Qariah? These are the things that you call Al-Qariah, they're not real Al-Qariah, right? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقَارِعَةُ. And just to further emphasize the immensity of it, and to just get your attention even more, and what will let you know? What will let you know what this Al-Qari'ah is? Meaning, you don't really know. This is part of the knowledge of the unseen. Remember we talked about the unseen? This is the unseen. When Allah talks about وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ, He's always talking about the unseen. And the implicit message is that you can't fathom it. It is something that we can give you the closest sort of connection or correlation in terms of the limited understanding that you have of the things of this world. Because this is a very finite world, right? We barely know enough about our own planet. The depths of the sea, there is what, like they say, some huge percentage of marine life that we don't even know, we haven't even seen yet. There are places in the depths of the ocean we haven't discovered yet, right? And then talk about space and talk about the expanding universe, talk about all this. So there is so much that we don't know, even in this physical world, in this physical realm. What is beyond that, right? What is beyond space and time? Those are things that belong in the knowledge of God, knowledge of the unseen. And so basically, the descriptions of things in the Quran and the scriptures is something that we should never take lightly, and we should never think that what the Quran describes is something we have seen. When the Quran describes the unseen, you really have to let it be and remain unseen. It's just the closest thing you can understand. The reality of what the Day of Judgment will be like, only Allah knows, right? And so, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقَارِعَةُ. What will let you know, meaning you don't know? What will let you know what Al-Qariah is? And then, every time the Quran says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ something, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا something, then the next verse talks about, He reveals to you, as best as you can understand, a little bit glimpse of that unseen thing. يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسُ. Al-Qari'ah is the name of a day. So Al-Qari'ah is a day. What is it? Yawm. It's يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسُ. When people will be like what? كَالْفَرَاشِ, like the moth, right? It's moth al-mabthuth. Mabthuth is scattered, spread everywhere. وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ. And on that day, that will happen to people. What will happen to the environment around us? وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ. And these mountains, with all of these mighty and very, very strong and high mountains, what will happen to them? وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْعِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. It will be like wool that's carded, meaning something that's as strong as this would be like wool that's kind of carded and separated to make it look fluffy and big, right? The reality of this is only known to Allah. We can maybe understand it a little bit when we think about some of these big catastrophic events that happen when meteoroids they hit the earth or other planets. Lots of destruction happens, right? And so when the dinosaurs went extinct, when all of these different continents were one continent, right? It was called what? Pangea, right? Pangea was once struck by something from the space, and a lot of destruction happened. a big percentage, 50 to something percentage of life then completely vanished and disappeared as a result of the heat that was caused as a result of all the volcanoes and all the crazy things that happened, right? So you can understand that something like that can happen again. It has happened before. It's very much possible. So that could be one way that God ends this life on this earth, right? But that's a guesstimate. That's just that's conjecture. What really will happen, what this day of judgment looks like, when it'll happen, all of it is part of the knowledge of the unseen, and the descriptions are not meant to be complete or the full description, because that's not possible for us to fathom. We cannot understand it. The limit is ours, not God's. The limit is our understanding, our minds, and the reach of our thinking. And so we leave it at that. And so the point is, you get that deterrent, the message of deterrence. You get that, life is so precious that it can be taken from you, that this life individually for us, we have a limited time, but collectively humanity has a limited time on this planet. It's going to come to an end, right? It's going to come to an end sooner or later. So for us to take advantage of the time we have as civilization, as individuals, to make this world currently the best place we can make it for others. The best place we can make it for others, and make this world as close as possible to paradise, even though you cannot replicate paradise. Do your best. What's your best effort? What's your best version of paradise that you can give humanity? Do that. And what's your best effort to make sure that this earth doesn't become hellfire? That the Quran talks about hellfire as well, that it doesn't become that. Do your best effort. Right? You may not be able to do that fully, but what you're capable of, based on that, you will be questioned. And so, يوم يكون الناس كالفراش المبثوث وتكون الجبال كالعهن المنفوش. So on that day, these kinds of things would happen. There would be utter chaos and destruction. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. There's safety and security, and there is safe passage, and there is beauty. There's light for people who did the things that we discussed, that they tried to make this world a paradise, and they tried to prevent this earth becoming hellfire. And so for those people, there's good news. فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. Whoever amongst human beings whose scales of deeds, right, are heavy, meaning heavy with good deeds, right? فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. If your scales of deeds are heavy with good deeds, are because the mawazin is either the plural of mizan, which is scale, or the plural of mawzun, which is the things that is weighed. Either way, the things that are weighed, your actions are weighed. And again, when your actions are weighed on these scales, we don't know what the scale looks like. And how do you even, think about it, how do you even weigh? There's no weight to your actions, right? If, you whatever good or bad you do, you cannot, can you fathom putting it on a scale in this world? No, right?
Part of the unseen.
It's part of the unseen again. But metaphorically, what weighs a lot, meaning in a good way, on God's scales is the good deeds, right? The good deeds, they implying that it's something that He likes, then they're heavy deeds, they're good deeds. The good that you have done, فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. And that person is in what kind of life? A life that is satisfying and pleasing And again, the satisfaction and the pleasure of the hereafter is something that we cannot experience here. So when the Quran talks about the satisfaction of the hereafter, the food of paradise, the water of paradise, the wine and the milk and all of that, that's just a close approximation. And it's nowhere near close, but based on our understanding. That is it. The reality is only known to God. But there will be things will be happening to you that you will be pleased with. وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ, as for those whose scales of deeds are light in good deeds, but heavy in bad deeds, right? So when Allah talks about heavy scales, what He means is heavy with good deeds, light with bad deeds, or non-existing bad deeds. When He talks about light, right, light scales, meaning the scales are light when it comes to good deeds, but heavy with bad deeds. When their scales are light of good deeds, very heavy with bad, فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ, then their place is going to be a very bad place. And what is Hawiyah? Again, the question is asked to describe to us what Hawiyah is. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ. What will tell you what Hawiyah is? نَارٌ حَامِيَةٌ. It is scorching fire, and again, only Allah knows what that looks like. Don't think that the fire here is in part of that, right? It's a different world, different realm. We leave the reality of it to Allah. And so again, the message of this surah is leave the unseen to Allah. The knowledge of the unseen belongs to Him. What's within your reach, you explore and you increase your knowledge, and you as civilization, you make progress and you uncover and discover and explore. Of course, these are things that are temporarily knowledge of the unseen, but you're allowed to access them. In this world, a lot of things were part of the knowledge of the unseen 20 years ago, 30 years ago. How much did we know about artificial intelligence, right? Conceptually, there were books, chapters in certain books. But today we actually use it, right? Some of us use it a little too much, right? Artificial intelligence. And I'm going to age myself a little bit, but I remember in college I wrote one of my, I guess it was my final project, was I picked the topic of self-driving cars or whatever, and it was like fascinating for me to imagine. There was some literature, some people, some predictions, but that long ago, 15, 20 years ago, it didn't really exist much, right? But now that's reality, right? It's reality now. So there are things that are part of the unseen that is waiting for us to uncover it and to make use of it for the betterment of humanity. That's temporarily unseen, okay? But then there are things that are always going to be unseen until Allah allows us to see it in the next life. And so some of these things mentioned in this chapter are those unseen things. So leave the unseen in God's domain. Don't spend too much time thinking about and trying to find different angles of describing and picturing paradise or hellfire or day of judgment. Leave it. The description you're given, take that. Get the main message that this is supposed to be a reminder of how temporary and how fleeting this life is. That's the message you're supposed to get. And then when there's harsh things that are mentioned, that's a deterrent. Have a little bit of fear, a little bit of awakening. It's a message, of compassion and love in disguise, even when God's talk in harsh and stark terms. The reality is, this is love disguised in these kinds of very, very difficult terms, right? And when you see the good things that he mentions, again, don't start imagining and drawing pictures of paradise on paper or in your brain and your mind, right? Just think about the blessings of Allah and know that God knows the limit of it, the beauty of it. You cannot experience it here, you cannot imagine it, describe it here. Strive for it, right? And so that's the first part of the lesson. The most consequential part of this surah is to reflect on how do we make sure that our scales are heavy with good deeds and light when it comes to bad deeds. How do we make sure that our bad deeds are light and our good deeds are heavy? That's the main message. And that happens when you fulfill the rights of Allah, when you engage in acts of worship to fulfill God's rights, and you abstain from things for His sake, knowing that there is more leeway there, that He will forgive you if you fall short when it comes to His rights. He will forgive you. There's always the doors of tawbah and repentance and forgiveness. A million ways that God forgives sin, right? When it's just between you and Him. This is not a license to go sin, right? That shouldn't be the intention ever, but we're bound to fall and to fail and to make these mistakes. In order for us not to lose hope and not to fall into despair, it's important to know that He forgives. It's important to know that He reminds you that His mercy encompasses everything, that His love and compassion is something that He reminds you that it outweighs His anger and wrath, that the entirety of the message of the Quran can be summarized in compassion and mercy. That the Prophet, the Quran says, was sent as a mercy to all of the world. That's important to know, right? It's important to keep that ratio in mind. But when it comes to the rights of others, when it comes to how we have the capacity as human beings to make this life a living hell for other people, right? وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ نَارٌ حَامِيَةٌ. That's in the hereafter. That you don't know. But there is a hellfire that you can create here with your own hands for other people. So when you do that, then those messages of deterrence may become your reality in the next life. Those pits of fire, the burning and the crushing and all of those things are mentioned, they may become your consequences and your reality. So a deterrent for us to make sure that we don't make other people's lives hard, and that rather we do everything to make this world a good place for all, and to contribute towards making it a replica of Jannah, knowing that this world will never ever be paradise. No matter how good life becomes, it will not become paradise. So don't try to create paradise here. Know that paradise, that's our home, inshallah, is in the next phase. And know that this world can never be hellfire. No matter how difficult others make your life for you, it is nothing compared to the actual hellfire. Because whatever situation you have here, whether you live in this the Jannah of this world or in the Jahannam of this world, the paradise of this world or in the hellfire of this world, it comes to an end. It's not forever. It's the one in the next life that's forever. May Allah protect us from Jahannam, and may He give us paradise, and may He be pleased with us when we meet Him. Inshallah. Yeah, heavy topic, heavy surah, but of course, the mercy and the rahmah and the compassion of God shines through all of these even very difficult surahs. That we all need that jolt of reality and that deterrence to be our best version, inshallah. All right, I think I spoke too much, too long. Okay. Any reflections anybody wants to share? No judgment zone. No questions are bad or like not smart.
Well, just to comment on the reason why Allah mentions like how the mountains are gonna be like roughed up, right? Like in other verses he mentions that he has set mountains firmly into the earth, providing stability, and that's scientifically proven too. So even something as firm as those will be like in such a state of like uneasiness or disarray.
Right. Absolutely.
I always thought that Rasha was a butterfly, not a moth. That's what I learned in Arabic class. Rasha is butterfly, but I suppose it depends on the context.
Yeah, maybe sometimes in one language that the difference is not that much, right?
Yeah, it's like the difference is not that big, but it's just something that I noticed personally.
Okay.
Because that's, if I was translating that word myself, I would not write moth in English. You know what
Right.
I'm saying?
But I think the meaning is it points towards like the fact that moths and butterflies, they all come from worms or caterpillars, and then when they I guess transform into butterflies, they scatter, right?
Right.
Especially in like huge numbers. So I think that's what it's pointing out to.
Right, when they're like scattering and going everywhere.
Yeah.
When
It's like Black Friday, I was just like, Black Friday.
there you go.
That was